Some interviews make headlines. This one would make history. Prince Harry stepped into the bright lights of the Kelly Clarkson Show, expecting another routine chat about his book and charity work. But what he got was a relentless barrage of questions about Meghan, the royal family, and his private life. And by the end of the hour, the stage would turn into a battlefield. Neither of them would walk away from unscathed. The audience erupted into cheers as the announcer's voice boomed through the studio. "Please welcome Prince Harry." Harry walked onto the stage with his usual half-smile and casual confidence. Dressed in a crisp navy suit, he waved politely to the crowd and exchanged a quick handshake with Kelly before settling into the oversized chair across from her. The set glowed in soft pastels, the Hollywood backdrop framed perfectly behind them. Kelly leaned forward, her southern charm radiating through her wide grin. "Welcome to the show, Harry, or should I say your Royal Highness," she teased. Harry chuckled faintly but didn't bite. "Harry is fine," he said, already gripping the arms of his chair just a little too tightly. At first, the conversation danced around safe topics: his memoir, his recent charity initiatives, and his love of nature. The audience clapped politely at every answer, and Harry's responses were short but composed. But then Kelly's tone shifted. "So, Harry," she said sweetly, flipping through her cue cards, "you've been quite vocal about stepping away from royal life. Was it more Meghan's decision or yours?" The question landed like a stone in the middle of the room. Harry's smile thinned. He glanced at the audience, then back at Kelly, his voice flat. "I think that's a very personal matter, don't you?" Kelly didn't flinch. She was used to guests getting defensive. In fact, she seemed to thrive on it. "Of course it's personal," she said, nodding sympathetically. "But you've made it very public, haven't you? I mean, with the Netflix series, the interviews, the book, it seems like you want privacy but keep telling everyone your business." A low murmur rippled through the audience. Harry's jaw tightened visibly. "You know, he began, his tone sharper now. "There's a difference between choosing to tell your own story and having others sell it for you. Maybe you don't understand that distinction, Kelly." The crowd gasped lightly at the jab, but Kelly only grinned wider, sensing she had struck a nerve. "Fair enough," she said. "But don't you think some of the criticism is valid? The royals have cut you off, haven't they? There must be a reason." Harry leaned forward now, his eyes narrowing. "I came here to talk about my work, not to justify my family's dysfunction for your ratings," he snapped, his British accent curling around each word with controlled venom. Kelly raised an eyebrow, pretending to look wounded but clearly enjoying the rising tension. "Oh, don't get me wrong," she said. "I admire what you're trying to do. But don't you think it's a little hypocritical, asking for space while airing all the dirty laundry?" Harry let out a humorless laugh. "Hypocritical? That's rich coming from someone who's made a career prying into people's lives for entertainment." The audience oohed at that, and Kelly finally leaned back in her chair, her grin fading slightly. The stage manager glanced nervously from behind the camera as the temperature in the room began to plummet. Kelly pressed on anyway, emboldened. "Look, Harry, people want to know the truth. Are you even on speaking terms with William anymore? Or your father? I mean, how does it feel to be completely cut off from the family you once called home?" Harry's nostrils flared slightly as he sat back, crossing his arms. His voice was low, cold. "You really don't know when to stop, do you?" Kelly blinked, clearly caught off guard by the sheer contempt in his tone. "I'm just asking the questions everyone wants to know," she said, her smile now brittle. Harry shook his head slowly. "No, you're asking the questions that sell ads." The audience went dead silent at that, sensing the storm that was brewing between them. Kelly's fingers drummed lightly on her cards, her jaw tightening now. "Well, if you didn't want to talk about it, maybe you shouldn't have written a book about it, huh?" Harry's eyes darkened. "You're really going to lecture me about what I should or shouldn't have done? You?" Kelly opened her mouth to reply, but Harry cut her off, his voice rising just enough to make a few audience members flinch. "You don't know a bloody thing about what it's like to live under that kind of scrutiny, to have your every move twisted, to have your wife compared to your dead mother in the tabloids day after day." His voice cracked ever so slightly on the last words, but his stare never wavered. Kelly sat back, stunned for the first time since the interview began. The tension in the room was now suffocating, the air thick with anticipation of what might come next. The producer in the control booth whispered frantically into his headset, already debating whether to cut to commercial. But Kelly wasn't done. Not yet. She leaned forward once more, her voice calm but edged with steel. I think the world deserves to know if you regret it, Harry. Leaving the crown, leaving your family. Do you? Harry's lips curled into a bitter smile. Do I regret leaving behind people who cared more about public image than their own son? Do I regret protecting my wife and children from that nightmare? No, Kelly, I don't. But I do regret thinking I'd find empathy here. The audience was split. Some clapped softly, others sat frozen in their seats. And then, almost as if rehearsed, Kelly delivered her final blow of the segment. So you're saying you've burned all those bridges, and you don't care about what anyone back home thinks of you? Harry turned toward her fully now, his glare like ice. You're damn right I don't. And if you keep asking these bloody questions, you're going to find out just how much I don't care about this interview either. The studio gasped. The lights felt hotter, the set suddenly much smaller. Kelly straightened her cards with a slight tremor in her hands, but her eyes locked defiantly with his. The stage manager signaled for a break, but neither of them moved. And as the camera zoomed in on Harry's clenched jaw and Kelly's narrowed eyes, it was clear. This wasn't just an interview anymore. This was war. The lights flared back up after the break, but the tension never dimmed. The audience was quieter now, leaning forward, sensing they were watching something that had already crossed the line into unforgettable television. Kelly's smile had cooled to something sharper, and Harry's eyes were fixed somewhere just past her shoulder, as though daring himself not to look at her. Kelly shuffled her cards theatrically and plastered a polite grin on her face. All right, welcome back. We're here with Prince Harry. Harry cut her off before she could finish. Just Harry. We've established that already, haven't we? A few audience members chuckled nervously, but Kelly wasn't laughing. She tapped her stack of cards against the desk, her voice tight but still honeyed. Well, just Harry, you've certainly made waves with your memoir and your interviews, but a lot of people feel you've, how shall I say it, betrayed the institution that made you who you are. How do you respond to that? Harry's jaw tightened visibly, but his tone stayed even. It's fascinating to me how people talk about loyalty to an institution, but not to people. I was loyal for years, longer than anyone deserved, and it nearly destroyed me. Kelly raised her eyebrows. Destroyed you, or just bruised your ego a little? The words hung in the air like a slap. Harry turned to her fully now, his hands clasped together in his lap, knuckles white. Do you honestly think what happened to my mother didn't destroy all of us? Do you think watching history repeat itself while the so-called family stood by and did nothing was about my ego? Kelly held up a hand as if to calm him, but the edge in her voice was unmistakable. We all loved Diana, she said softly, but this isn't about her. This is about you throwing stones at the people who raised you, at the Queen in her final years. Harry's chair screeched slightly as he shifted forward, his composure beginning to crack. Don't you dare lecture me about my grandmother, he growled, his British accent sharp now. Kelly straightened in her seat, squaring her shoulders like she'd just won a point. So you do still care what they think? Or do you just care when it makes you look good in the press? The studio murmured again. The audience was divided. Some gasped, others smirked, sensing blood in the water. Harry shook his head slowly, letting out a dry, humorless laugh. You really have no idea what you're talking about. You sit here behind this desk playing judge and jury over lives you can't begin to understand. Do you enjoy it? Is this what you call journalism? Kelly met his stare with her own icy glare, her voice now dripping with sarcasm. Oh, forgive me, Your Majesty. I forgot that you're the only one allowed to have an opinion. Harry's jaw clenched as his voice dropped to a whisper, though the microphone still picked up every syllable. Don't call me that. The warning in his tone sent a chill through the room. But Kelly wasn't finished. She leaned in, her hands folded neatly, her smile now razor thin. I just want to know, Harry, do you actually believe you and Meghan were forced out? Or was it just easier to leave than to deal with being, well, irrelevant? That did it. Harry's cheeks flushed crimson as his entire body stiffened. He laughed bitterly, shaking his head again. You think we left because we weren't getting enough attention? You really believe that's what this was about? Maybe you should try living under a microscope where every move is criticized, every breath dissected, and every headline twists you into something you're not. Kelly didn't flinch. In fact, she pressed even harder. Well, you've certainly been getting plenty of attention since you left, haven't you? The book deal, the Netflix series, the interviews. You claim you wanted privacy, but you're on more magazine covers now than ever. So which is it, Harry? Do you want to be left alone, or do you want to stay famous? For the first time, Harry raised his voice loud enough that the audience recoiled. You don't get to decide how I tell my story, Kelly. You and your gossip machine don't own my life. You're no better than the tabloids that hounded my mother to her grave. Gasps and nervous whispers rippled through the studio. Kelly blinked at the outburst, clearly startled, but quickly recovered her composure. Well, she began, her tone now openly mocking, I guess we've hit a nerve, haven't we? Maybe it's time you admitted that some of this circus is your own doing. Harry stood suddenly, the chair behind him nearly tipping over. You have no right, he snapped, pointing at her now. No right to sit there and tell me what I should have done. You weren't there. You didn't see it. You don't know what it's like. The audience froze. A few people in the front row instinctively leaned back as though his fury might leap from the stage. Kelly didn't back down, though her voice was quieter now, her smile almost gone. I know what it's like to live in the public eye, Harry, and I know what it's like to face criticism. But I also know how to take responsibility for my choices. Can you say the same? Harry's eyes narrowed to slits. You're unbelievable, he muttered. Kelly leaned forward again, a final taunt ready on her lips. And yet, here you are, sitting in that chair, selling your story, just like the rest of us. Harry's lip curled as he took a deep breath, trying and failing to calm himself. This interview, he said slowly, is a bloody disgrace. And as he stood there glaring down at Kelly, the audience held its collective breath, knowing they were watching something that was only going to get uglier from here. The studio was electric now, not with excitement, but with dread. Even the camera operators hesitated to zoom in too close, as though afraid of being collateral damage in the growing storm. Harry stood tall, still towering over Kelly's desk, his hands gripping the edge so tightly his knuckles were white. Kelly, to her credit, didn't shrink back, though the smugness in her expression was starting to crack. If you're going to storm out, just go already, she said finally, her voice cold, but the faintest tremor betrayed her nerves. Harry glared at her, his jaw working as though he was biting back even sharper words. Instead, he sat back down, his chest rising and falling like a man trying to suppress something volcanic. No, he said after a moment, his voice low but charged. We're not done yet. Kelly leaned back, crossing her arms. Oh, good. Then let's talk about Megan, shall we? Because you seem to think the world owes you both an apology when all anyone sees is two people constantly playing the victims. Tell me, Harry, when does the victim act stop and accountability begin? The crowd audibly gasped, a few murmurs rippling through the audience. Harry froze for a second, then laughed bitterly, shaking his head. Victim act. That's rich, coming from someone who makes her living tearing people apart for ratings. Kelly's eyes narrowed. We ask tough questions here, Harry. Sorry if that makes you uncomfortable. But you've built an entire career in the last few years off the idea that you've been wronged. And yet here you sit, in designer clothes with a best-selling book, a Netflix deal, and millions in the bank, telling us how hard your life is. Do you hear yourself? Harry turned fully toward her now, his voice growing louder, each word clipped and deliberate. Do you hear yourself? You sit there in judgment, as though you've lived a single day in my shoes. You think money erases the trauma? You think a camera in my face at my mother's funeral was just a minor inconvenience? Kelly started to interject, but Harry cut her off, his voice booming now. You have no idea what it's like to watch your wife sob on the floor because she's being called every vile name imaginable in the press. while the people who are supposed to protect her do nothing. And then you sit here smiling, calling it a victim act? Who the hell do you think you are? The audience recoiled slightly, stunned into silence. A few people exchanged uneasy glances. Some looked down at their laps, clearly uncomfortable. Kelly's own expression hardened. She sat up straighter, her voice now icy. I'm someone doing my job, which is more than I can say for you who ran away from his responsibilities because it got too hard. You abandoned your family, your country, your duty, and now you want sympathy for it. That line clearly struck a nerve. Harry slammed his palm flat on the desk, the sharp sound echoing through the set. I didn't abandon anyone, he roared. I protected my family, something you clearly don't understand. Kelly actually flinched at his volume but quickly recovered, her tone dripping with disdain. Oh, please, spare me the noble act. You're not protecting anyone. You're cashing in. You're just another celebrity selling your sob story to the highest bidder. And the saddest part, you actually believe your own hype. Harry leaned forward again, his face inches from hers now, his voice dropping back down to a dangerous whisper. The saddest part, he seethed, is watching people like you twist human suffering into a punchline. You're nothing but a parasite. The crowd gasped again, some letting out low whistles of disbelief. Even Kelly's co-hosts, who had stayed silent thus far, started shifting uncomfortably in their chairs. Kelly's lips curled into a humorless smile. You done, Prince? She asked, her tone mocking. Harry's eyes narrowed. Don't call me that, not from you. Kelly tilted her head, still smiling faintly. Why, because you're ashamed of it? Or because you know you don't deserve it anymore? For a moment, Harry said nothing, just stared at her with an intensity that made everyone in the room hold their breath. Then he stood again, slowly this time, his hands balling into fists at his sides. You really don't know when to quit, do you? Kelly smirked faintly, though her voice betrayed a note of tension. We don't quit here. We ask the questions that need to be asked. And if you can't handle them, maybe you should stay home next time. Harry shook his head, laughing humorlessly. You think this is journalism? This isn't journalism. This is theater. You're not uncovering truths. You're putting on a show, playing to the lowest common denominator. You're pathetic. The word landed like a slap. Even Kelly's co-host visibly winced. But Kelly leaned forward now, her voice a whip crack. And you're just another spoiled brat who couldn't handle not being the center of attention anymore. You want respect, Harry? Earn it. Don't just demand it. That finally pushed him over the edge. He slammed his hand on the desk again, his voice rising into a full-throated roar that silenced even the faintest murmurs in the crowd. You want to talk about respect? You sit there day after day, tearing people down for ratings, pretending you're better than everyone who sits in this chair. You're not. You're cruel. You're petty. And you're everything that's wrong with this world. Kelly blinked, momentarily stunned by the ferocity of his outburst. The audience was dead silent, as though afraid even to breathe. And then, as Harry stood there, chest heaving, eyes blazing, Kelly slowly rose from her chair as well. The stare down between them was electric, like two storms about to collide. Kelly took a single step closer to him, her voice barely above a whisper but cutting through the silence like a knife. You need to leave. Harry's lips curled into a smirk, though his eyes were still full of fire. Oh, I intend to, but not before everyone here sees exactly who you really are. And as the two stood locked in their silent battle, the entire studio waited, knowing the final confrontation was about to erupt, and that nothing about this interview could ever be salvaged. For a moment, the studio was so quiet you could hear the faint whir of the cameras and the nervous cough of a stagehand off to the side. Kelly and Harry stood there, inches apart, glaring at each other like two prize fighters waiting for the bell. Then Kelly broke the silence. You want to humiliate me? On my stage? In front of my audience? She hissed, her voice low but laced with venom. Harry didn't flinch. Instead, he leaned slightly closer, his eyes burning. No, he said, you've done a good enough job of that yourself. The crowd audibly gasped, a sharp collective intake of breath that rattled the air. Kelly straightened, her face flushing with both anger and embarrassment. "You are out of line," she shot back, her voice cracking slightly. "Out of line, may you?" Harry laughed, a harsh, humorless sound. "You dragged my wife into this. You dragged my family, my trauma, my mother's death, all of it, into this little circus you call a talk show. And I'm the one out of line." Kelly's jaw tightened. "You came here knowing full well what this show is about. We don't coddle people here. We ask the questions everyone else is afraid to ask." Harry's expression darkened, his voice dropping into a dangerous whisper. "No, you don't ask questions. You throw accusations. You twist words. You bait people into losing their temper so you can sit back and play the victim. That's not journalism. That's not even entertainment. That's cruelty, plain and simple." Kelly's hands clenched at her sides. The audience was torn, some clearly uncomfortable, others on the edge of their seats, phones out, recording every second. Kelly took a deep breath and spoke through gritted teeth. "If you can't handle the heat, maybe you should have stayed in your palace." That was it, the line that snapped whatever fragile restraint Harry had left. He slammed his hands on the desk so hard the mugs rattled and one even tipped over. His voice thundered through the studio. "I left the palace to protect my family, to protect my wife, to protect my children from people like you, and now you sit here, wagging your finger, pretending you know something about my life?" The audience froze. Even the band stopped playing in the corner, the drummer holding his sticks midair. Kelly's smirk finally faltered. "You're proving everyone right, Harry," she sneered. "You're nothing but an angry, spoiled prince who thinks the world owes him something." Harry's face went pale, then red, then finally settled into something cold, distant. His voice lowered into a terrifying calm. "You should choose your words carefully, Kelly." Kelly crossed her arms defiantly. "Or what?" Harry straightened to his full height, towering over her. He pointed toward her chair. "You think you're untouchable because you sit here, day after day, with cameras and an audience to cheer you on. But one day, people are going to wake up and realize you're just a bully hiding behind a smile." Kelly rolled her eyes. "And you're just a man who couldn't handle reality. Get out." The words landed like a slap in the room. Harry froze, blinking once, as though surprised she'd actually said it out loud. Then his lips curled into the faintest, coldest smile anyone had ever seen on him. "You finally said something honest," he muttered. He took a step back from the desk, adjusted the cuffs of his shirt with deliberate precision, then looked out at the silent audience. "You all saw it. Every single one of you. This isn't about tough questions. This isn't about accountability. This is about cruelty dressed up as entertainment." The crowd stayed dead quiet, some looking at their phones, others staring at the floor. Harry's voice grew louder, addressing everyone now. "We came here today to talk about my work. My film, my causes." But she couldn't resist dragging my wife through the mud. She couldn't resist mocking what we've been through. And you all just sat there and watched. He shook his head slowly, his disappointment radiating through the room. "That's the real shame here. Not that she said it, but that you all let her." Then he turned back to Kelly, his tone suddenly cutting. Final. "I've survived worse than you. Much worse. So go ahead. Enjoy your little moment of power. But remember this. When the cameras stop rolling, you still have to live with yourself." Kelly's jaw dropped slightly, as if the weight of the words finally hit her, but she quickly masked it with a sharp glare. "Security," she barked, her voice louder than necessary. "Show him out." Two security guards approached reluctantly, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of physically removing him. But Harry raised a hand, stopping them in their tracks. "Don't bother," he said coolly. "I'm leaving. But not because she asked. Because I refuse to stay in a place this toxic for another second." He started walking toward the exit, but paused halfway and turned back one last time. "You want to talk about victims, Kelly? Look in the mirror. You're the saddest one of all." With that, he walked off the set, the studio doors closing behind him with a quiet but decisive thud. The audience erupted, some clapping, some booing, all of them buzzing with the knowledge they'd just witnessed a moment that would dominate headlines for weeks to come. Kelly stood alone at her desk, her cheeks flushed and her breathing shallow. The producer scrambled to cut to commercial, but the damage was done. Social media would explode within minutes. Clips of Harry's final words would go viral before he even reached the car waiting outside. As he stepped into the cool evening air, Harry exhaled slowly, his face hard but his eyes strangely calm. He'd come for an interview. He left having burned the stage down, and everyone watching would remember exactly who started the fire. If you enjoyed this intense story, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe for more shocking celebrity confrontations that reveal the truth behind the cameras. Let us know in the comments. Was Harry justified, or did he go too far? We want to hear your thoughts.